I remember standing in line at the grocery store with my food stamp card in my hand, trying to hide it from the people behind me. My daughter was 3 years old, sitting in the cart, asking for a cookie from the bakery section. I had to tell her no, not because I didn't want to give her a cookie, but because I had exactly $23 in food stamps to last us the rest of the week, and cookies weren't going to fill her belly. I was 25 years old, a single mother, living in a tiny apartment with cockroaches and a landlord who didn't fix anything. I worked 2 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. I was exhausted all the time, scared all the time, and I felt like a failure. If you had told me then that 10 years later I'd be a millionaire, I would have laughed in your face. Actually, I probably would have cried, because the idea of having enough money to not worry about every single dollar seemed impossible, like a fairy tale, like something that happened to other people, but never to people like me. But here I am today, 35 years old, a self-made millionaire, and I'm going to tell you exactly how I got here. Not because I want to brag, not because I think I'm special, but because if I can do it, starting from where I started, then maybe my story can give someone else hope. Maybe someone out there needs to hear that it's possible to change your life, even when it feels impossible. This is my real story, the whole truth, the struggles, the failures, the moments I almost gave up, and the choices that changed everything. It wasn't easy, it wasn't fast, and it definitely wasn't a straight line. But it was worth it. Every hard moment, every sacrifice, every time I wanted to quit but didn't. So let me take you back to where it all began, back to that tiny apartment, back to the food stamps, back to the version of me who didn't know if she'd ever be okay. My name is Sarah. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest where nobody had much money, but we got by. My parents worked hard. Dad was a factory worker. Mom cleaned houses. We lived in a small house on the edge of town, and we were happy enough. Not rich, but we always had food on the table and a roof over our heads. I was a good student in high school. I got decent grades. I had dreams of going to college, maybe becoming a teacher. But life had other plans. When I was 19, I met James at a friend's party. He was charming and funny and made me feel special. We started dating. 6 months later, I was pregnant. James promised we'd figure it out together. He said he loved me and wanted to build a family. So we got a small apartment together. I dropped out of the community college I'd just started. I got a job waitressing. James worked at an auto shop. We were young and broke, but I thought we'd make it work. Our daughter, Emma, was born when I was 20. She was perfect, tiny and beautiful and mine. For a while, things were okay. Hard, but okay. James and I struggled with money, but we had each other, or at least I thought we did. When Emma was 2, James left. Just like that. He said he wasn't ready to be a father. He said he felt trapped. He packed his stuff one afternoon while I was at work, and when I came home, he was gone. No note, no explanation beyond a text message that said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." I was devastated, heartbroken, angry. But more than anything, I was terrified, because now I was alone with a 2-year-old daughter, and I had no idea how I was going to survive. I tried to make it work on my own. I worked double shifts at the diner. I picked up a second job cleaning offices at night. I barely slept. I'd drop Emma off at a neighbor's house who watched kids for cheap, work all day, pick her up, put her to bed, then go clean offices until midnight. Then I'd come home, sleep for a few hours, and do it all over again. But it wasn't enough. Rent was $600 a month, and I was making maybe $1,300 if I worked every single shift I could get. After rent, there was $700 left for everything else: food, diapers, utilities, gas, daycare. The math didn't work. No matter how hard I tried, the math never worked. That's when I applied for food stamps. I'd never thought I'd be the kind of person who needed government assistance. I'd always been proud, independent. But pride doesn't feed your kid, so I swallowed it and went to the welfare office and filled out the forms. I'll never forget the day I got my EBT card in the mail. I sat at my tiny kitchen table and cried. Not because I was grateful, though I was, but because it felt like admitting defeat, like admitting I'd failed, like this was proof that I wasn't good enough, strong enough, smart enough to take care of my own child. The food stamps helped. We could eat, but everything else was still a struggle. I was always behind on something. The electric bill, the water bill. I got eviction notices twice because I was late on rent. I lived in constant fear that I'd lose our apartment and we'd end up homeless. Emma was too young to understand how bad things were, and I was grateful for that. I tried to keep things normal for her. I'd read her stories at bedtime, even when I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I'd play with her on my days off, even when every muscle in my body ached from exhaustion. I smiled and sang songs and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was drowning. I felt like I was working as hard as I possibly could and still failing. I'd lie awake at night doing math in my head, trying to figure out how to stretch $20 until next payday. I'd pray that my car wouldn't break down because I had no money to fix it. I'd skip meals so Emma could have enough to eat. One night, after a particularly hard day, I sat on the floor of my bathroom and just sobbed. I was so tired, so scared, so hopeless. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. I was 23 years old and I felt ancient, worn out, used up. That's when something shifted. I don't know if it was rock bottom or just a moment of clarity, but something in me decided that I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't keep working myself to death and still be poor. I couldn't keep hoping things would magically get better. If my life was going to change, I had to change it. I just didn't know how yet.
I started reading. That sounds simple, maybe even silly, but it changed everything. I didn't have money for college or fancy courses or business coaching, but I had a library card, and the library was free. I'd go on my lunch breaks at the diner and spend 30 minutes reading books about business, about money, about people who'd started with nothing and built something. I read about real estate investing. I read about starting small businesses. I read about stocks and saving and budgeting. I soaked up every piece of information I could find. One book talked about the difference between working for money and making money work for you. That concept blew my mind. I'd spent my whole life trading my time for dollars. Work an hour, get paid for an hour. But what if there was a way to earn money even when I wasn't actively working? I became obsessed with this idea. I started listening to podcasts while I cleaned offices at night. I watched YouTube videos about entrepreneurship on my phone during Emma's nap times. I was hungry for knowledge in a way I'd never been hungry for anything before. But knowledge alone doesn't change anything. I needed to take action, and that's where I got stuck. What could I possibly do? I had no money to invest, no special skills, no college degree, no connections. What business could someone like me even start? I looked around my life for answers. What did I know how to do? I could waitress. I could clean. Those were my only real skills. Not exactly the foundation for $1 million business. But then I had an idea. A small idea. Maybe even a stupid idea. But it was something. I'd been cleaning offices for almost a year, and I'd noticed something. The cleaning company I worked for charged the businesses way more than they paid me. I made $12 an hour, but I knew they charged the offices at least $30 or $40 an hour for my work. They were making money off my labor. What if I cut out the middleman? What if I started my own cleaning business?
The idea terrified me. I'd never run a business before. I didn't know anything about taxes or licenses or insurance or any of that stuff. But I also couldn't stop thinking about it. What if I could make $30 an hour instead of 12? What if I could set my own schedule? What if this was my way out? I started small, really small. I asked one of the offices I already cleaned if they'd hire me directly instead of going through the company. I offered to charge less than what they were currently paying. They said yes. Just like that, I had my first client. One office, 3 hours a week, $90. It doesn't sound like much, but it was money that went directly to me instead of to a company that took most of it. I kept my other jobs at first because I was terrified to give up that steady income, but I started putting flyers on car windshields in business parking lots. Simple flyers I made on the computer at the library. Affordable office cleaning, reliable, trustworthy, with my phone number at the bottom. I got a few calls, then a few more. Within 3 months, I had 5 regular clients. I was cleaning offices every night, and the money was better than what I'd been making before. Not great, but better.
But I was still exhausted, still working myself to the bone, still barely making it. I realized that if I was going to really build something, I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. That's when I made one of the scariest decisions of my life. I hired someone. Her name was Maria. She was a woman I'd met at the welfare office months earlier. She had 2 kids and was in the same situation I'd been in, working multiple jobs and still struggling. I offered to pay her $15 an hour to help me clean offices, more than I'd been making when I started. And in return, I could take on more clients. It worked. With Maria's help, I could clean twice as many offices in the same amount of time. I raised my rate slightly, I got more clients. Within 6 months, I had 10 regular clients and 2 employees, Maria and another woman named Lisa. I was making about $3,000 a month after I paid Maria and Lisa. That was more than I'd ever made in my life. I was able to quit my waitressing job. I could spend more time with Emma. I could sleep more than 4 hours a night. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But I also realized something important. If I wanted to really grow this business, I needed to think bigger. I couldn't just be a person with a mop and a bucket. I needed to be a real business. I saved up $500 and hired a lawyer to help me set up an LLC. I got business insurance. I opened a business bank account. I made a real website. I started marketing myself as a professional cleaning company, not just a woman who cleaned offices. And it worked. Businesses started taking me more seriously. I got bigger contracts, office buildings with multiple floors, medical offices, small retail spaces. I hired more employees, bought better equipment, raised my rates to match the quality of service we provided. By the time Emma was 5, I was running a cleaning company with 15 employees and making about $10,000 a month in profit. $10,000! I remember the first month I hit that number, I sat in my car and cried because I couldn't believe it was real. But I didn't stop there. I kept pushing, kept growing. I started bidding on commercial contracts. I landed a contract to clean a small office building with 20 businesses in it. That one contract brought in $5,000 a month. The business kept growing, but so did the challenges. Managing employees is hard. Dealing with client complaints is stressful. Handling payroll and taxes and insurance and all the business stuff I'd never learned in school was overwhelming. There were nights I wanted to quit. Days I thought I'd made a huge mistake. But I kept going. Because going back to food stamps wasn't an option. Because I'd promised myself and my daughter that we'd never be that poor again. Because I'd tasted success and I wanted more of it.
When Emma was 7, something happened that changed everything again. I was cleaning a large office building one evening when I overheard 2 businessmen talking in the hallway.
They were discussing real estate investments. One of them was saying how he'd bought a small apartment building and was making passive income from rent. Passive income. Money that came in whether you worked or not. I'd read about real estate investing in those library books years ago, but it always seemed impossible. You needed money to buy property, lots of money. Money I didn't have. But now I had some money saved. Not a lot, maybe $40,000 that I'd managed to save over the past few years. Was that enough? I started researching. I learned about FHA loans that let you buy a property with as little as 3.5% down if you lived in it. I learned about house hacking, where you buy a multi-unit property, live in one unit, and rent out the others. I found a small duplex in a decent neighborhood that was selling for $120,000. With an FHA loan, I'd need about $4,000 for the down payment, plus closing costs. I had enough. I was terrified. Buying property felt like such a huge, permanent decision. What if I failed? What if I couldn't find tenants? What if something major broke and I couldn't afford to fix it? But I'd been scared before and done it anyway, so I made an offer, and it was accepted. 3 months later, I owned a duplex. Emma and I lived in one unit. I rented out the other unit for $900 a month. My mortgage was $1,200, so the rent from the other unit covered most of my housing cost, and I only had to pay $300 out of pocket. It was brilliant. I'd gone from paying $600 in rent to paying $300 for a place I actually owned, and I was building equity. But the real magic happened a year later. I'd saved up more money from the cleaning business, and I bought another duplex using the same strategy, then another 6 months after that. By the time Emma was 10, I owned 4 duplexes. I lived in one unit and rented out 7 units to tenants. The rental income was bringing in about $6,000 a month. After mortgages and expenses, I was clearing about $2,000 in passive income from the properties. Combined with the profit from the cleaning business, I was making over $150,000 a year. I was wealthy, actually wealthy, not just getting by, but thriving. I paid off my car. I bought Emma nice clothes and toys without checking price tags. I took her to Disney World for her 10th birthday, something I never thought I'd be able to afford. I put money in savings. I invested in retirement accounts. But here's what nobody tells you about making money. It doesn't fix everything. Yes, I had financial security now, but I was also working all the time, managing the cleaning business, dealing with tenant issues, maintaining properties. I'd traded one kind of stress for another. And I realized that I didn't want to work this hard forever. I wanted time freedom, not just money freedom. So I made another big decision. I started training a manager to run the cleaning business day to day. I hired a property management company to handle my rental properties. I stepped back from the daily operations and focused on strategy and growth instead of doing everything myself. It was hard to let go. I'd built everything with my own hands. But I learned that if you want to scale beyond yourself, you have to trust other people to help you. And once I did that, everything changed again. With more time freed up, I could look for bigger opportunities. I started buying larger apartment buildings, 4 units, 8 units. I partnered with other investors on a 12-unit building. The more properties I bought, the more income I generated. And the more income I generated, the more properties I could buy. It became a beautiful cycle of growth. When I turned 33, I sat down with my accountant to do my taxes. She looked at me and said, "Sarah, do you realize your net worth is over $1 million?" I stared at her. $1 million. Me, the girl who'd stood in line with food stamps 8 years earlier. The single mom who'd worked 2 jobs and still couldn't pay rent on time. The woman who'd felt like a complete failure. I was a millionaire. I went home that night and just sat on my couch in silence.
Emma was at a friend's house. I was alone. And I cried. Not sad tears, not happy tears exactly, just overwhelmed tears. Tears of disbelief and gratitude and relief. I'd done it. I'd actually done it.
If you're listening to this and you're struggling right now, I want you to know something. Your current situation is not your final destination. I was a 25-year-old single mom on food stamps with no degree, no money, and no clear path forward. If someone had told me I'd be a millionaire by 35, I wouldn't have believed them. It seemed impossible. But here's what I've learned. Change doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small steps, one decision at a time, one risk at a time, one hard choice at a time. For me, it started with reading books at the library. Then it was starting a tiny cleaning business with one client. Then it was hiring my first employee. Then it was buying my first property. None of these steps alone made me a millionaire, but together, over time, they added up to something bigger than I ever imagined. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a lot of money to start. You don't need a college degree or special connections. What you need is a willingness to learn, to work hard, and to keep going even when it's scary. Will it be easy? No. There were so many times I wanted to quit. Times I cried from exhaustion and frustration. Times I failed and had to start over. Times I made mistakes that cost me money and pride. But I kept going, and that made all the difference. If you're working multiple jobs and still struggling to pay bills, I see you. I've been you. If you're using food stamps to feed your kids and feeling ashamed, I understand. I've been there. If you're lying awake at night wondering how you'll make it through another month, I know that fear. But I also know something else. You're capable of more than you realize. The same strength that gets you through each hard day is the strength that can build a better future. Start small. Read a book. Learn a skill. Start a side hustle. Save $10. Whatever you can do, do it. Then do the next thing, and the next. Don't worry about the big picture yet. Just take the next small step. And be patient with yourself. My journey took 10 years from food stamps to millionaire. 10 years. That's a long time. There were no shortcuts, no overnight success, just consistent effort over a long period of time. But it was worth it. Every sacrifice, every late night, every moment of fear and doubt, it was all worth it. Today, when I see young mothers in the grocery store using EBT cards, I want to hug them and tell them it's going to be okay, that this moment doesn't define them, that there's hope, that they're doing their best, and that's enough. I want them to know what I wish someone had told me. You're not a failure, you're surviving, and survival is the first step to thriving. My daughter Emma asks me sometimes about when we were poor. She doesn't remember it clearly, but she's heard me talk about it. She asks if I wish things had been different, and honestly, I don't. Because that struggle made me who I am. It gave me empathy. It gave me drive. It gave me appreciation for everything I have now. It taught me that I don't need anyone to save me because I can save myself. That's what I want to pass on to her. Not just money, though she'll have that, but the knowledge that she's capable of handling hard things, that setbacks don't have to be permanent, that she has the power to create the life she wants. If I can leave you with one thing, it's this. Don't let where you are now convince you of where you'll always be. Your circumstances can change. You can change them. It won't be easy, but it's possible. I'm living proof. From food stamps to millionaire, from hopeless to hopeful, from barely surviving to actually thriving. If I can do it,
So can you. I believe that with everything in me. So start today. Start small, but start. Your future self is waiting, and they're counting on you to take that first step. You've got this. I promise you, you've got this. And 10 years from now, I hope you'll look back at this moment and realize it was the beginning of everything changing, just like I do. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gave you even a small spark of hope, because hope is where change begins. Take care of yourself, keep going, and never, ever give up on the life you deserve. You're worth the fight.